Can't hear you. Microphone?
Sorry. Better?
Yes.
Any initial thoughts or questions about that? Yeah.
Well, I remember years ago, I worked with a gentleman, phone company who was a police officer. I think we had a couple of police officers here. But he said the worst calls they ever went on were domestic calls.
Yeah.
And that was back before they changed the law. That's where they had to have, in most cases, the wife press charges before they could
Right.
arrest the husband. So
Right.
they changed that. But, you know, you think what officers deal with, and I think that's the worst call
Right.
they told.
So when I said that I didn't initially seek out working with kids in trauma, I actually wanted to work with women in domestic violence. I'm a childhood survivor. I lived in 3 different domestic violence shelters before the age of 13. I went to so many schools before 5th grade. I went to 3 of them twice. So I initially went into mental health as a bachelor's level student to work with women in domestic violence. And I'll try to explain this in a way that isn't, again, going to be traumatizing for anyone in here, but at the time it was during the point when women were responsible for pressing charges. And actually, there were several problems with that, not just within the court system, but also within the police department themselves. So sometimes when I was young, and this was common when I was working as a bachelor's level student, police officers just thought this was a conflict that needed to be worked out. It would encourage folks to work things out. And that was even more traumatizing because I knew we weren't safe. And then there was this person that was a helper coming in and telling my parents to work it out. And when you're a victim, there is no working it out. There was no way for my mother to work it out, and that was the case for the majority of women that I worked with. So I initially went into it for that, but when I went off to graduate school in Michigan, I had the opportunity, well, let's back up a little bit. When I was working in Topeka, one of my jobs as an intern was to provide support for women who were coming to court, because that was that year when we took that choice away from women and we made it a charge that was brought on by the state. And so part of my job was to escort women back into this room before they went in there from court. And sometimes they'd have their children with them because they didn't have childcare. And I won't get into really graphic details, but I will say the worst case that I ever worked involved 3 children under the age of 8. And when they came into shelter, what we discovered was the father had held their mother at gunpoint in front of them and made some really horrible threats to the children for them to do some really horrible things to family pet. And if they didn't do it, then he was going to kill their mom. And in that case, the mom came to court and the children were with her, and what I saw was an offender be charged with assault and battery. In this case, he was also charged with sexual assault, and he was charged with cruelty to an animal, which resulted in animal death. But he was not charged with child abuse. And at that time, the middle child had become mute. The oldest child had become so aggressive that it wasn't safe to have him in a room with other children at the shelter, and the youngest child was not able to stop crying ever. And when I asked my supervisor, as this young, naive person in college, I don't understand. And I was told there are no laws that say that domestic violence is abuse to a child. So that started my journey. So when I went to Detroit for my internship, I specifically chose this domestic violence program because I thought I want to be a therapist with children in domestic violence. And what we know about domestic violence now is that children who are traumatized by domestic violence suffer symptoms that are 3 times greater than being abused themselves. And that has a lot of really scientific reasons that I won't bore you with, but also those So really, our knowledge base of that domestic violence has grown in huge ways from when we were in the late 70s and the 80s. Any other thoughts, questions? Did you guys notice when the offender picked the little girl up, when he picked Zoe up outside, did you notice any similarities between that and when the child protection worker came? Okay, so sometimes what we do in our best intentions, right? We don't have any idea what we might be doing, or what we might be causing, or what we might be triggering. I'm guaranteeing you this wasn't the first incident for this little girl, that she's been living with this most of her life, and what she knew to do was run. And this was her stable place. This was the only place she knew. She was very dependent upon her baby brother to feel okay, and the first thing they did was take him from her, right? A lot of times for children with trauma, they can have some really atypical attachments to siblings. Sometimes it's a good thing, and sometimes it's not such a good thing. The first foster home that she went to, what did you notice about that one?
That mother was had no patience.
Right. And did you notice she just went to go pick some berries and was eating them? And suddenly that created this huge reaction, and that foster mom grabbed her. So once again, there's that grab and the yelling, and that is going to be a huge, that would be a huge thing for any kid, but for a kid who's experienced trauma where there's fighting and violence. And so what was the little girl's response?
Fight that.
Right. Well, so she took her record player and dumped it over the edge. So a lot of times when we have kids with trauma and attachment issues, they will do things to sabotage the relationship. They're children. They have no power. So they will take the only power that they have, and they'll mess with you because it's uncomfortable. And there's also this concept of, you told me this was going to be safe, and this person did something, sometimes unknowingly, that made me feel unsafe, so I'm going to take my power back in any way I can, okay? And then also the scene where they were grabbing her and taking her into the shower. Children with trauma have often been forced a lot. One of the big toe-to-toes I get into, no matter what setting I work in, is sometimes when kids are real little, people like to force things out of kids' hands or force them to go somewhere, and I am the person in the room that says, let go, let go. I had a client one time that was coming out of psychiatric care, long history of trauma. He was holding an object, I won't get into what it was, he was a 5th grader, he was holding an object and his teacher wanted it back. And now I adore this teacher. Sometimes when kids don't listen to our directions because we're bigger and more powerful, we think, well, let's make them do it, right? So she very nonchalantly walked up and went to pull it out of his hands, and he didn't even think, just took a fist right to the face. That child was expelled, put in psychiatric care, and was not allowed to return. Now, it wasn't her fault, but children who are coming from trauma will often perceive that as a threat. And we'll get into that in a little bit more. Another thing is, what did you notice about when she went to the last foster mom? What's that? Yeah, she bought her that dress. Why was that a problem? Yeah, she was having a really vivid memory. But also, did you see her face when she said, come here, I've got something for you? In her world, that child, so thinking about what you guys might be doing, in her world, that child, when I've got something for you, if it's a gift, there's a string attached, right? What's going to happen reimburse it to you. But because she had this rapport building, because this foster mom was more understanding, she came back with the dress on, and what did she hear?
Phone call.
She was calling Child Protective Services, and she assumed the worst, which was probably pretty on target. She had a reason to assume the worst, right? I think what is unrealistic about this narrative that I think is super important, just the play therapist in me wants to tell you, is that there's a lot of internalization with this little girl in this movie, saying things like, I am lovable, I deserve to feel safe. Kids don't think that way. I think they make this video especially for adults. Most times kids don't know why they're feeling and behaving the way that they feel and behave. That is something that, you know, I'm a therapist. Some folks are trained in behavioral analysis, and we don't agree on that. They'll say, this is attention-seeking behavior, and I'll say, so? What? Attention for what? What do they mean? So that's something to think about, is that while this video is really helpful to give you some behaviors you might see, I do think they adulted it a little bit, so that that's how adults think, right? We think, I deserve another chance. Well, kids don't think like that, okay? Any other questions, or why was it so important for that baby to show up? What do you think that told her?
She was.
Yeah, or I have input. This thing that I'm most worried about that's going to make me feel normal is here, in this safe place, right? Yeah.
Okay, I'm having just retired from the dental school.
Uh-huh.
One of the things that we were taught was that it was a state law that you had, that teachers, medical professionals, or any such, if you see what is obviously child abuse with a black eye and a damaged lip, that you're required to report it.
Uh-huh.
In this case, was this old enough before those laws were enacted?
No, I think that's how she went into care, because she had her picture taken that day, and she showed up with a mark.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's how she went into care. Here's where I get a little cynical on you. I was a therapist in the foster care system. I've met many foster parents. I've met many folks in the foster care system, and I've met many folks in Child Protective Services. Our systems are broken to a degree that our children are suffering beyond what they're even in when we rescue them. While that is the law, while I do take it very seriously, I give mandated reporter trainings. I do not think this was the idea. This is not the typical outcome. That is not the typical outcome for a child to be removed from a home, even with marks like that. Yes?
You mentioned that they don't have a child abuse statute or whatever out of the domestic violence.
They do now.
I was going to ask, I just don't remember that whether they've changed it in Missouri or Kansas.
I don't know about Missouri.
Violations. I mean, I know they'll charge with
Yeah.
abuse.
I know that.
About domestic violence.
I know that I don't know about Missouri, but I was saying when I was a bachelor's fellow worker, that's when those laws changed. We actually had a community task force. We developed one with police officers, and that was huge for me. That was a big personal moment for me. And fun side note, I was the first intern to work at the shelter where I stayed as a child. So when I got there, my supervisor and I, you have this thing called a practicum, that's your internship, and then you have weekly meetings. And I sat down and she said, is there anything you want me to know about yourself? And I remembered her first name. And I said, my name is Tina, and I stayed here as a child. And the look on her face, I mean, she'd seen everything, and she did kind of rally the staff around me and said, this is a first for us, and we need to be really conscientious of that. But that was when that law changed, and I remember being in that task force room and really having a lot of negative feelings about law enforcement officers in the room. And I love my law enforcement officers are my people. I mean, I work with them a lot, and they help keep us safe in what I do. I had some particular feelings. I will disclose this. A law enforcement officer showed up to my home a lot when I was a child. My mom finally escaped, and he would do a lot of the whole, you guys need to work this out, what about your kids, kind of thing. months after my mom escaped and moved us into another city, and we were hiding, I came downstairs at probably 4 o'clock in the morning and found my mom sitting on the couch, and there was a front page paper of a police officer whose wife was in the hospital dying from being beaten to death, and it was that police officer's wife. So that for me was a huge, like, oh my gosh, you know. And so I did form some really bad generalizations, and being on this task force with police officers was really healing for me, because I straight up told these people, I do not have good experience with you folks. My experience with you folks as a child is that you're coming in to take one of my parents away, or you're coming in to tell my mom and dad to work it out, and you have no idea what it's going to be like. You have no clue. And he was so patient with me, this one police officer was so patient with me, because he knew that there had been a pretty troubled history with how we respond to that. And he was one of the big reasons why, when we worked together with state policies and state legislature of, this has got to change. How we perceive domestic violence has to change. This isn't an argument. It really was just coming from a place of ignorance, just not knowing any better. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
So what exactly is trauma? The big thing to know about trauma is what might be a trauma for you might not be a trauma for someone else. I work with some kids who live in such a chronically traumatic environment that when something happens that really shakes up another kid, it doesn't bother them at all. That's their normal, So to really understand, and Dr. Bruce Perry is probably be y'all and y'all in terms of understanding trauma, but to really understand the definition of trauma, the really thing to understand is that it evokes a sense of fear and helplessness, and is outside of your realm of typical experience, okay? And so that would be abuse, domestic violence, poverty. Hey, listen, poverty is violent. When you don't know if your house is going to be heated, or if you're going to have food, or if you are going to be able to have a place to live, that is traumatizing. It is, I think, the #1 cause of trauma that we don't address because we think it's a personal problem. There's still some of that mindset of folks are poor because they made bad choices. So really thinking about what poverty does. Divorce. I have worked with, obviously, a lot of kids who come from divorce. I think the most traumatizing effects of divorce is not the divorce itself, but how the parents respond during the divorce. Death, neglect, be it intentional or unintentional. Folks are real quick to judge other parents. We really are. And we think, in that video, we see that mom, and she wasn't running after her daughter. She was running after the police officer taking her husband away. And we're real quick to judge. What are you doing? Why are you staying there? If I had a dime for the number of times my mother was told, why would you put your kids through that? Okay, so whether it be intentional or unintentional, neglect is traumatic. I've worked with parents who don't understand. I have worked with a lot of parents who will give babies baby bottles of watered down milk because that's what you can do to stretch the budget. And then they get in trouble because their baby's malnourished. That's not intentional. Substance abuse. How is substance abuse traumatic?
Depends on the substance. Alcohol, #1.
Yeah.
Family of an alcoholic, severe alcoholism.
Yeah.
It's a bad environment for a kid, they tend to be neglected.
Right.
Secondly, in our area, we have a bad meth problem.
Yeah.
And
So,
we'll sell a kid for meth.
yeah. So can you properly attune to a baby or a toddler when you are under the influence
No.
of drug? No. So a lot of times with substance abuse, what I see is parents who, they're addicted, they're addicts, and they need that fix, whether it's alcohol or heroin or meth, and they're high, and they have their baby with them. But the baby's been in the crib for 6 hours and they don't know it, right?
It's got to make some Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
Formula.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mental illness is much the same way. My husband and I are both mental health providers, so we like to joke my son's going to be in therapy forever. But a lot of times, again, we're real quick to judge. Mental illness, there should be no stigma attached to that. You have a right to be a parent if you have a mental illness. But without the proper support and without the proper care, that can be really traumatizing to kids. Multiple primary caregivers, especially before the age of 4, when we are looking at attachment development, that 0 to 4, so in utero to 4, and probably my toughest client that I had when I was working in community mental health was a 13-year-old girl, and I think she'd been through 5 different therapists. But because I had sort of gone after working with trauma and attachment with all of my might, they finally sent her to me and said, look, see what you can figure out. She's got every diagnosis under the sun. And I did everything everybody else did. I did the family history, I did everything. But then it was in a casual conversation with mom. I knew she was adopted, and I was told she was adopted at birth. And this girl had had a particularly bad incident that week at home, so mom came in to talk to me with some coaching that night. And she had a memory. And her memory was when she got her daughter back. And I said, when you got her back? And she said, oh yeah. She said, her mom didn't really want to give her up. And I said, oh. And she said, yeah, so we got her right away, but it was after a few days after she left the hospital. She just kept changing her mind while she was in the hospital. She really didn't want to give her up, but her mother told her she had to. And I said, okay. And she said, and then there's that 30-day period where they had to change their mind. And so she was home with us for a couple weeks, and then she changed her mind, so we had to give her back. And in that time, the biological mother was breastfeeding this baby for the next 3 months. Finally realized, my mom's not gonna help me, I've gotta get this baby back. So she gave the baby back, and the baby was inconsolable. Would scream and cry all night. And so this mother had this memory of, because her daughter was inconsolable that week, had this memory of being up with her all night and trying to console her and the baby trying to nurse. And it startled her. And then she startled the baby. And I went, bingo. There you go. There's our trauma. Okay? So that 0 to 4 trauma, this 13-year-old girl, she had no idea about any of that, not consciously. So anything that happens between the ages 0 to 4, that's that severe, even if things get better after that, you're going to see, I worked with a lot of the international adopted kids, you're going to see some trauma behaviors. Neglected basic needs, kind of went into that. Attunement is basically that eye contact, how many of you ever, you're Santa Claus, you see babies, and what do? You get right in their face, and you make a big exaggerated face, right? And the babies go, right? Okay, so that thing that happens with parents and babies or whoever, that's called a dance. That's attunement. And if you are high, or if you're depressed, or if you're hallucinating, or if you are working 4 jobs and you don't have time, you can't do that with your baby. Okay? So that falls in the range of neglect too. Parent incarceration. The way we incarcerate parents right now, we're just creating a whole new level of folks ready to be incarcerated because they're not getting what they need. You can have some opinions about folks that need to go to jail, but their children need parents. So there's a lot of research out there about programs for children or with their parents. death of a loved one. I'm sure there's other